There are people who can't stay too long in noisy places, not because of shyness, not because of fear, but because something inside them keeps pulling inward, like there's a silent room in their chest that no one else can see. And maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me because while everyone seemed comfortable in the noise, in the rush, in large groups, in conversations that never go deep, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like I was betraying a part of myself. Every time I stayed too long away from silence and I tried to fit in, tried to be more sociable, more present, more normal. But the more I tried, the more I felt I was drifting away from something sacred. Until one day, during a solitary prayer, I realized it wasn't me who was wrong. It was the world that had forgotten that silence is also a place, a real place, an inhabited place. And if you feel this too, maybe you don't need to force yourself out of it. Maybe you just need to understand why you were called. There's a type of person the world never knew how to name properly. Call them introverts, quiet ones, distant. But these words don't capture what really happens inside. Because it's not about disliking people. It's not about wanting to be alone all the time. It's about feeling that there's a conversation happening on another level. A conversation that the noise of the world interrupts. Andemar. You try to explain this to someone, the more lonely you feel. Because how do you explain that you feel God's presence more clearly when you're alone? How do you say that? Crowds tire you not because you're weak, but because you're tuned to a different frequency? There are days when you look at the people around you and feel a distance that isn't physical. It's as if they're living at a speed you can't keep up with, not because you're slow, but because you're paying attention to things they don't see. You notice the pain behind forced smiles. You feel the heaviness in rooms that everyone else calls comfortable. You sense when something is off, when someone is hurting, when the atmosphere shifts in ways that no one else detects. And it's exhausting, carrying all of that awareness while everyone around you moves through life seemingly unburdened. You walk through your days feeling like you're carrying stones that no one else can see, stones of unspoken pain, stones of collective anxiety, stones of spiritual warfare, happening in dimensions most people don't acknowledge. And then you come home, close the door, and finally you, Cumbria, finally you can set down that weight. Finally you can hear the voice that's been trying to reach you through the noise. And in that silence, in that solitude, the world calls it problem. You find something they'll never understand. You find company, God's company, and it's more real than any superficial conversation you could have out there. It's more nourishing than any gathering that leaves you feeling empty. Because in that silence, you're not performing, you're not pretending, you're just you, completely, honestly, vulnerably. You and God meets you there, not with judgment, not with demands, but with love, with acceptance that doesn't require you to change, with peace that doesn't ask you to be anything other than what you are. The worst part isn't feeling like you don't belong. The worst part is when you start believing there's something wrong with you for not belong, because everyone tells you that you need to go out more, socialize more, expose yourself more. They say it with concern, like they're trying to save you. And you try. You really try. But each attempt drains something from you, like you're using energy that wasn't meant to be used that way, like a solar panel trying to function in darkness. It's not that you can't do it. It's that it costs you something. It doesn't cost others. And at the end of the day, you come back exhausted. Not because you did something difficult, but because you spent hours pretending to be comfortable where you never were. You laughed at jokes that didn't resonate. You engaged in small talk that felt like nails on a chalkboard to your soul. You smiled through conversations that never touched anything true, anything deep, anything that mattered. And then comes the guilt. Heavy, suffocating guilt. Because you think you should be grateful, should enjoy, should be like everyone else who thrives in these situations. Your friends gain energy from crowds while you lose it. They feel alive in noise while you feel like you're disappearing. And you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you do need to push yourself more. Maybe you are being difficult, antisocial, broken in some way. But the truth is that God didn't make you like everyone else. He made you for something different, something deeper, something that requires silence to be heard. And while the world insists you're isolating yourself, God knows you're drawing closer, closer to Him, to what really matters, to what is eternal. There's a verse that says, "Be still and know that I am God. Be still." It's not passivities. It's not giving up. It's positioning. It's choosing to be where God speaks most clearly. And for you, that place has always been silence. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And the world confuses them constantly. They see you alone and assume you're suffering. Assume you need rescue. Assume your life is incomplete because you're not constantly surrounded by people. But the truth is, you've never been less alone than when you're alone with God. Because in that silence, in that space, the world calls empty. You feel a presence. It's not imagination. It's not psychological comfort. It's real. More real than most interactions you have out there. More substantial than conversations that fill time but never fill the soul. And the more time you spend there, the more you realize the world is full of people alone in crowds, full of people surrounded by voices, but with no one really listening, full of people who go to parties and come home feeling more isolated, full of people who are seen but never truly known. And you, who spend so much time alone, are having the deepest conversation anyone can have. You're being heard, not just your words, but your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, the things you can't articulate. You're being seen, not just your surface, but your depths, the parts you hide from everyone, the parts you're ashamed of, the parts you don't understand. You're being known fully, completely, without pretense, and you're still loved, still accepted, is still held. There's something. Jesus, did that few notice? He withdrew. In the middle of ministry, in the middle of crowds, in the middle of demands, he withdrew to solitary places to pray, not because he was antisocial, but because he knew the most important relationship wasn't with crowds, it was with the Father. And if Jesus needed this inward movement. Who are we to think we don't? Not every call-in comes with thundersummy, komiaza, whisper so low that only the quiet can hear it, a whisper drowned out by everyday noise, a whisper that only reaches those who've learned inner stillness. And maybe that's why you were made this way, not to shout from platforms, not to lead crowds, not to be on stages, but to listen, to capture what others cannot, to air God's voice in frequencies the world drowns. Ouchie. There's a sensitivity in you that the world never valued, but God always saw. You feel things others don't. You perceive things others can't. You walk into a room and know immediately what the atmosphere carries. You sensed when someone is hurting, even when they're smiling. You feel unspoken prayers. You carry burdens never explained to you, and it exhausts you because you carry the emotional and spiritual weight of everything. You kapturi, like being a sponge that soaks up everything, and no one taught you how to wring yourself out. But it also positions you in a place of spiritual perception few reach. You weren't called to front lines where battles are loud and visible. You were called to intercession, to the secret place, to the invisible altar, where real battles are won, where principalities are confronted not with words, but with presence, where the enemy is defeated, not through strategy, but through surrender to God. And the world will never applaud this. Will never recognize it. Will never give awards. 4 hours spent in prayer no one sees. For tears no one counts. For wrestling with God that leaves you limp and but transformed. But God sees every moment, every prayer, every tear. And He doesn't need you to be different. Doesn't need you to be louder, more visible, more like everyone else. He needs you to be faithful to what you are, because there are prayers only you can pray. Perceptions only. You will have spiritual battles only. You can fight because only you have been positioned in this place of intimacy with Him. And if you leave this place to fit into what the world expects, you'll lose something. You'll never recover. Clarity, sensitivity, connection. If this touched you, if this prayer found you in the silence, maybe you need to hear you're in the right place. You're not behind. You're not missing out. You're exactly where God needs you to be. There comes a moment when you stop apologizing, stop trying to explain, stop feeling like you need to justify why you need so much time alone, why you can't do social events, why you need to leave early, why you need space when everyone else seems content with constant connection. And in that moment, something shifts. What once seemed like a defect reveals itself as a design. You realize that silent room inside you isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary, and not everyone has access to it. Not because you're excluding them, but because not everyone was built to endure silence. Most people run from it, fill their lives with noise, distraction, anything that prevents them from being alone with themselves. Because silence forces you to face what you've been avoiding. It strips away distractions. It removes masks. It confronts you with your own heart. And most people aren't ready for that. But you are. Not because you're stronger, but because God has been preparing you. training you to sit in discomfort until it becomes comfort, to stay in silence until it becomes sacred, to wait in emptiness until it becomes fullness. And when you understand this, everything changes. You don't leave silence with guilt. You live with purpose. You don't return from time alone, apologizing for being absent. You return renewed, strengthened, realigned, because you've been in the only place where truth doesn't need filtering, where you don't need to perform, where God sees you as you really are and still chooses to stay, still chooses to love, still chooses to call you his. And there's something deeply liberating in that, knowing you don't need to be more, don't need to be different. You just need to be present. But living this way isn't easy, because the world doesn't stop demanding. Doesn't stop telling you that you need to be more visible, more productive, more present, more available, more connected. The messages come from everywhere, from social media, making you feel like you're falling behind, from career advice telling you to network more, from friends who worry you're isolating yourself, from family who don't understand why you can't just be normal. And there are days when you get tired, bone tired, so tired. Tired of being misunderstood by people who love you but can't comprehend how you're wired. Tired of explaining you're not sad, just quiet, not avoiding people, just seeking God. Not depressed, just different. Tired of seeing others celebrated for extroversion while you're treated as if you're hiding or broken. And then comes the temptation to change, to force a version of yourself that isn't real, just to be accepted, just to fit in, just to stop feeling like the odd one out. But every time you try, something resists, because you know deep down that